Hello, friends, and welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. I'm Andrew Lazaga.
And I'm Dubside, and here we are again.
Yes. Last week, we had an interview with Greg Stamer, and I just wanted to let you know it went really well because I know that you're not on the internet.
Yeah.
For our listeners, I'd like to say that Dubside makes it a point to not be on the internet.
I get everything secondhand, so it kind of filters out the extraneous stuff and the vitriol.
And that might not be a bad thing, actually.
Yeah, it works for me.
Of course, I'll have to send you a copy of this interview. And the way we do it is I put it on a thumb drive and send it to him by snail mail.
Yeah, that works for me.
Well, unless the thumb drive gets lost.
Oh, we did have a problem there once, but yeah, that was hopefully just an anomaly.
Yeah, I don't know what happened about that. Maybe someday it'll show up.
Yeah.
So I have to tell Dubside about all the stuff that's going on the internet these days.
All right, fill me in.
Okay, well, the interesting thing about what Greg had to say on the early history of the Greenland style movement was people were very dogmatic about certain things about Greenland style, in particular, the forward stroke.
Yeah.
Before they met Greenlanders, no one really knew the correct way to do a forward stroke. And people would watch Maligiaq's forward stroke, and they would say that he had just terrible Greenland form.
Yeah, it didn't match what they were thinking what the Greenland stroke was supposed to be. Yeah.
And it takes a long time to overcome the narrow-mindedness and dogma.
Well, I think it's teaching. The actual act of teaching, the teaching technique, becomes much easier if you're really dogmatic. If you have a set of rules and this is the way it has to be done, then you just follow the rule. That's teaching instruction. But it takes a lot more experience and knowledge of the teacher to be able to, say, well, this is why I'm doing this. This is what works for me. We can try this other thing. There's other schools of thought, and to understand the entire body of knowledge takes a lot longer time. And that's whether you're teaching, the Greenland stroke or the Euro stroke or anything. If you make it very simple and dogmatic, it's much easier to do. But that's not really good, effective teaching.
Yeah. Anyway, how did you first meet Greg?
He was at the first Del Marva I went to. He was a regular there, and so that was the first time I met him. And I remember I was there, I guess the day before, somewhat early, and we went. Him and with a few of us went out paddling on the bay there. I think he had one of those superior carbon fiber paddles. It was the first time I ever saw one of those, and he let me try it, and it felt rather awkward to have a carbon fiber paddle.
Oh, really?
But yeah, because it felt too light. Like it felt unusually light, and it's almost like aluminum baseball bats. Just the sound was different. It just didn't seem right somehow. But it took a while to get used to.
Didn't he break that paddle during a walrus pull?
Oh, I don't recall.
Okay.
I didn't hear that.
I seem to remember that he actually did end up breaking that paddle. I bought one of those too when they first came out, and I'm still using it. It's my favorite paddle, but it does make some noise. It squeaks in your hands, and if you knock it on something, it's hollow. And I had to always wear gloves when I used it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was either, I don't know, it just felt slippery or it made a lot of squeaking noise.
Yeah.
Have you ever done the walrus pull?
I have. I've never done it in the Greenland competition. We tried it. I think in Spain we were playing around with it, and I tried it that time. And I might have tried it once in the Seattle area at Kayak Academy. But it's what's disconcerting to me about it is that when I'm rolling by myself, when I'm practicing, no matter what roll I do, I'm in charge. I can come out if I have to wet exit. I haven't wet exited in ages, but I can go to a different roll, and I know what's going on. With a walrus pull, if you go under, if you get pulled under, you are at the mercy of the people pulling until they decide to stop, and there's nothing you can do until then. And that, not being in charge like that was very uncomfortable for those 5 seconds until they let go.
Yeah,
so that was my experience. Yeah.
It sounds like there's so much force when they do that paddles do get broken.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, the paddle can break. Sounds like pieces in the kayak can break. Yeah. I mean, you got to understand that the state of the art of carbon fiber construction has evolved quite a bit since. I mean, that Superior one was out in 2000 or something. That goes back 20 years.
Has it been that long?
Yeah. Well, Greg had one in 2001, the first time I was at Delmarva, so that's 20 years.
Wow, it sounds like I need to get a new paddle.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we should get on to the next Dubcast.
All right.
Welcome to the Dubcast with Dubside. This is Dubcast number 9 about the Greenland paddle. And rather than tell you about how to use the Greenland paddle and stroke techniques, that information is available many other places. So how about if I focus on some of the people who produce these paddles? There is Don Beale of Beale Paddles, Sarah Wagner with a blacklight paddle, Chris Raab, who makes Tuktu paddles, Anders Thygesen and his Norwegian wood paddles, and Chung Shi, the main guy at Gearlab, who are making carbon fiber paddles in Taiwan. And at the end of the episode, as per the usual, we will have some Greenlandic music. Well, to give you a brief summary of the traditional paddle, that's a paddle with generally the blades are not feathered, which means they're in the same plane, and they're quite narrow, and traditional paddles were typically made of wood before the advent of carbon fiber. And to use the Greenland paddle, you can see Greg Stamer describe that in my Modern Greenland Kayaking video. There's about a 5-minute segment there, and he gives you the rundown on the forward stroke technique. To get one of these paddles, you can either make one or buy one. And to make one, it requires a 2x4, about an 8-foot long 2x4. And if you're handy with a plane or a spoke shave, you can knock one of these out. It'll take you some time. You can do a little faster if you have a bandsaw to get the shape roughly started. There's information online on the details of this procedure. And you can also take a class with some of the people I'll be mentioning here who have offered classes to make a paddle. You usually get it done in a day or so. But if you want to buy one, let me describe a few of the places you can do that and some of the people who are making these paddles. Remember when I talked about the Hand of Pavia rescue and the guy named Don Beale who took to teaching that at the symposiums? Well, Don Beale has been making his Beale paddles for over 20 years from his location in Oregon. He was one of the first, if not the first person to offer custom-made wooden paddles to fit your own anatomical dimensions. Interesting thing about his paddles is when he was making his 9th or 10th one, he wanted to keep track of them, so he wrote the number on the paddle. And he kept on writing numbers on the paddles, and he numbers all of his paddles. He is now up to, I think he's past 800. That's an awful lot of paddles. And it doesn't include the paddles made in his workshops by his students, so he is responsible for well over 1,000 paddles at this point. There's a little bit of trivia. The Greenland Rolling with Dubside DVD that's been posted online by Andrew, I borrowed a Don Beale paddle to make that video. And if you go in the credits all the way towards the end there, it tells you that was Beale paddle number 183. So if you ever come across a Beale paddle with that number on it, that was the one that's in that video. That Kayak USA event held in the Seattle area, it's called STIKS, stands for South Sound Traditional Inuit Kayak Symposium. Don has been involved in that since the inception as one of the organizers. I have a lot of respect for Don's safety-mindedness. At that STIKS event, afterwards, they often take some of the special guests down to Oregon. Those are their driving back who live there, bring the other guests with them. And we'll go out paddling. In the Oregon, they have rivers that feed into the coast, and the Oregon coast is some serious water. And I remember one time we went out there was a river we could paddle on, nice places on the river, and we could paddle out to the mouth of the river, and there was some surf to play in. But we went out there, and inside before you get to the entrance to the ocean there's some nice things to play. There's current, there's waves, and there's little rocks and things to mess around on. And some people wanted to go out through the inlet there and into the play and find some waves to surf. And Don said, no, not a good idea. He said one missed roll, and it's a Coast Guard rescue. Because at that particular time, there was maximum ebb current. And it was so strong, it'll just take you miles offshore before you can get back in your kayak. So I heeded his advice, and I stayed inside and did not go out and play in the waves. Figured I'd come back some other time and do it when the tide was coming in. I got a friend in Norway named Anders Thygesen, and his business is called Kajakkspesialisten. I think that's Kajak Specialistin. Find it online. And he's been making skin-on-frame kayaks for many, many years as a profession. And he makes wooden paddles, Greenland wooden paddles, and somebody suggested some time back that he call them Norwegian wood because he uses Norwegian wood to make them. So he does. Norwegian wood paddles. Anders has been to Kayak USA events in the U.S. several times, doing kayak building workshops and making paddles. And he also attends an event in Norway I'll be telling you about in future Dubcasts. Some of the earlier two-piece wooden paddle designs had a tendency to develop a wobble. Maybe some of the recent ones do too, I don't know. So the join, the ferrule, starts to just jiggle a little bit, and as it widens on the inside, it just kind of goes downhill from there. So I have a two-piece made by Feathercraft. I've had a number of two-piece Feathercraft paddles from years back, and one, it got enough of a wobble in it, so I wanted to retire it, but I did something interesting with it. I took it to the Greenland competition in 2004, that first time I went with Cherry Perry, raced with it, rolled with it, and then at the final dinner, I took out a marker and I had everyone sign it. And I still have that paddle, and it's got Maligiaq's name is on there, and several other people in Greenland there. Sherry signed it. And maybe someday I'll put that on an auction table at a Kayak USA event, or I don't know. I'll find something interesting to do with that paddle. Well, modern-day space-age materials have been applied to paddle designs. And ever since Mark Rogers of Superior Kayaks made a carbon fiber Greenland paddle, many other people have tried the same idea. Carbon fiber allows you to make a very sharp edge of the blade. And I prefer that myself. It gives you a better purchase in the water, and it's a quieter paddle. You can carve wood in that sharpness, but it's very easy to dent the edge and ding it up every time you hit it against something, but the strength of carbon fiber will retain that shape through a lot of wear and tear. There's a paddle called the Black Light paddle from Sweden. It's got a very sharp edge. And this was made and developed by my friend Sarah Wagner, who first invited me to Sweden in 2007, and I've been going every year ever since. Sarah and her husband had an operation in Gothenburg, and they're both very well-trained instructors. And on her own, Sarah embarked on this research and development of a carbon fiber paddle to her liking. And she had a shape selected and then had the aluminum mold made, which cost a fair amount of money. And then over quite some number of years, researched how to make, you put extra layers in there, and you have these things like pre-preg and autoclave and other advanced techniques and materials to make something really strong and really light. And Sarah's paddle was, I think, so light, it was almost too light. She had also gone to such great lengths to make a fine paddle that the retail costs came to about $1,000. That is a bit much for a paddle. After a while, to save herself the trouble, she turned over the manufacture of that to the Lettmann company. But I think some issues developed with production as well as payment of royalties. I think Lettmann had to make some changes in production to suit their manufacturing process. I'm not sure what the status of that paddle is now. It may not be available. When I first met Sarah, she lived in Gothenburg, and her husband had one daughter. Then they had two daughters, and now she lives in Frillesås, a little town about an hour south of Gothenburg, and she's divorced, and her girls are just about teenagers. When they were much younger, the youngest one, Isa, they enjoyed going to get ice cream. And Isa decided that she wanted somebody to have her own ice cream shop. And when they moved to the little town of Frillesås, they still had the business in Gothenburg, but the housing prices were cheaper in Frillesås. And it was about 15 minutes to take a bike or walk down to the beach, coastline there. And Sarah took up swimming, this specialized branch of swimming called total immersion swimming. She was swimming at least once, sometimes twice a day, going down to the little beach area. And there's a house right there by the parking lot with a restaurant in it, the prime piece of real estate. Sarah has a remarkable determination and persistence. And after she got divorced, she sold that house they had. And eventually, she was in that prime piece of real estate right there on the beach. Didn't have to walk very far to go swimming. And she had converted the restaurant into an apartment to rent out to make money to cover the mortgage. She had a business partner going on with the mortgage with her. And the house had a garage facing the parking lot. And she converted the garage into an ice cream shop, so Isa could have the ice cream shop she always wanted. And it amazed me to find out that when the girls went to stay with their father, the ice cream shop did not close. It worked on the honor system. You got a garage, you got freezers and refrigerators, and there's a little sign saying how much each ice cream selection is. And there's a little box to put money in, or you can pay on your cell phone. And if you need to change a big bill, there's a little tin box with the Swedish kroner equivalent of at least $50 or $60 in it to make change with. And from upstairs, where Sarah is with the tremendous view out the picture windows, she can just push the remote control and open the garage door, and the ice cream shop is open. Now, I can't imagine that an honor system operation like that would work in anywhere close to an urban area in this country. Maybe way out in the countryside, but that's in Sweden, that's what they can do. Nobody ever stole anything or made off with the money. It worked okay. Until the business partner who had co-signed the mortgage pulled out, and the finance company wouldn't accept Sarah's credit alone, and as hard as she tried, she could not hold on to the house, so she had to move out to a different house, which gave her a little bit more distance to walk to go swimming every day, even though she still did go swimming every day. At this point, I come through to see Sarah every year, not quite knowing what situation she'll be in, and lately she can't find anybody who wants to do rolling instruction, so there's no work for me to do, but I don't care. It's a chance to catch up with an old friend. A few other carbon fiber paddles of note. There's a guy in Denmark making one called Gram Kayak, Gram. And he has a 3-piece version, which is kind of interesting. It's got a fairly good sharp edge on it, nice shape. Though it's still hard to get a 3-piece paddle that'll fit in carry-on luggage, because that would require that you make the join in the middle of the blade, which gets a little complicated. There's a paddle made by Pack Sport, the company that makes kayak hatches. And their design you can adjust the length of it right on the fly as you paddle. There's a kind of a clamp mechanism, and you can telescope it in or out and dial in your ideal length exactly where you want it. Does mean that when you slide over that section, there's a bit of a speed bump for your sliding stroke, but you can get used to that. I believe Mark Rogers is still producing that Superior Kayaks 2-piece carbon fiber paddle. Probably the most visible and readily available carbon fiber paddle being offered these days is by Gearlab. They're out of Taiwan. And the guy in charge of that, his name is Chung Shi. And I was able to meet him in Greenland when he took a trip with a few other people from Taiwan. And that Maligiaq was leading, that I went along on that trip. And Chung Shi is a very nice guy. He speaks a little bit of English. And that Gearlab is a design company that does not exclusively make Greenland or kayaking things. They make a number of other things, so which is good, because it not depending on such a niche market like kayaking bodes well that they will not go out of business anytime soon. They've got a lot of other irons in the fire, so it's pretty. I think it's a well-run operation. The various other carbon fiber paddles on the market have their pluses and minuses, but what sets Gearlab paddles apart from all the others is replaceable tips. As much as you try not to, you end up scraping your paddle against the rocks somewhere sooner or later. And any other paddle is just downhill from there. But Gearlab, you just whip out a little Allen wrench, undo the screws, pop on some new tips, and you're ready to go. Great design. I think they even give you some spare tips when you purchase a new paddle. And their latest model, they have a couple different things they've made in the past, but the one, it's called the Qajaq, as it's named, but I think in Greenland you would pronounce that Qajaq, that double L sound. And that's got some fairly sharp edges on it. And they also make a very nice carrying bag. On top of all that, they have a wide color selection, so if you want to match it to your PFD, you can do that. My friend Chris Raab makes Tuktu paddles. That's Tuktu, which is the Inuktitut word for caribou, which is similar to the Greenlandic word Tuktu for caribou. And Chris and I go back quite a ways. We both took the American Canoe Association instructor training in 2001 and became certified instructors. And Chris has gone much farther beyond that. He's an instructor trainer in the ACA, and he's offered classes certifying people to be instructors for quite a long time now. Chris does some really nice laminated paddles. That's where you take several layers of wood, sometimes with different shades or colors, and glue them all together and then carve the paddle out of that, and you get some very nice patterns. It also makes a stronger paddle because the grain irregularities and weaknesses aren't all in one spot. Chris works out of his garage, and when you're a one-man operation, sometimes it's difficult to maintain any decent inventory because people keep buying all your stuff. And it is a fair amount of work to keep that going, but that's what he does. Chris told me just recently that the cost for the lumber he uses went up 300 or 400%. And he didn't want to pass that on to his customers, but he really had no choice. So he was looking at alternative ways to keep a Greenland paddle affordable. Chris once gave me some really good advice about using a bandsaw. He said that the whole trick with a bandsaw is to finish the job with the same number of fingers as you started the job. And I always keep that in mind anytime I'm using a bandsaw. And I can see that Chris has followed that advice himself. He seems to have all 10 digits still intact. Chris has been teaching classes and doing instructor certification as long as I've been doing rolling instruction. And over the years, we've encountered all sorts of different people as students. Doctors, lawyers, fighter pilots, FBI agents, people who have gone very far in their fields. And when I finish a rolling class, a student pretty much knows whether they got the roll or not. That's fairly self-evident. But when Chris does instructor certification, he has to tell them whether they passed or not. And some of these highly educated people may not take lightly to being told that they didn't get some, probably some on-water skill they weren't doing sufficiently. If you give enough feedback during the class, you don't have to shock anyone at the end by telling them that they aren't going to pass. There are sometimes you get those outliers, people you don't normally see taking a kayak class. And Chris said that he was offering an instructor certification in northern New Jersey, up in the New York area once. And he gets somebody signing up. It's this kid from the Bronx, inner city homeboy, right out of the hood. And he's really keen to learn the material, but his friends all seem to be the gangbanger types, and he doesn't want them to know what he's doing. So he's got all the course material printed up, but he's got a backpack. He can stuff it all in there and zip it up tight, so when he goes home, nobody can see what he's got. So it's 3 days of instruction, and then at some point later on, there's a 2-day evaluation. And throughout that time, Chris can see that this kid has got it. Strokes and maneuvers, rescues, tides, currents, navigation. He's got a handle on everything. And at the end of the course, they have a little one-on-one exit interview with each student. So Chris takes the kid aside, and he tells him, he says, you aced the class. You were outstanding. You are now an ACA certified sea kayak instructor. And the kid turns his head down and he says, no one in my life has ever told me that I'm good at anything. And he just starts crying. I can tell you, as well as Chris can tell you, that in taking up kayaking as an occupation, whatever prestige we thought this would get us evaporated pretty quickly. And there is certainly not a whole lot of money to be made here. But the interactions we have with other people and the positive impact we can have on their lives, sometimes in very significant ways, that is what makes it all worthwhile. The piece of music I have today comes from a guy who played in a band called Aalut, A-A-L-U-T, and they billed themselves as a reggae band with their own Greenlandic slant on reggae. And Iisaavaraq Petrussen is his name, spells it with the old style spelling, so it's got some letters with the funny little marks on top of them in his first name. But Iisaavaraq Petrussen, Petrussen. There is a technique in Greenland kayaking known as the Petrussen maneuver. I'll describe sometime in the future. I could attempt a somewhat flimsy connection between this song and kayaking through that word Petrussen, but that would be a mere coincidence. Iisaavaraq put out a solo album sometime in the 1990s with some really, really nice music on it. He wrote all the songs. And this song is called Eqqarsaaqit, Eqqarsaaqit, which would be sort of like your thoughts, maybe. It's the third song on his CD, and this is on Ulo Music, and it's Ulo CD number 130. And on this CD, he's got Aviaya Lumholt, remember Pavia Lumholt's sister, singing backup vocals on this CD. And the song is called Eqqarsaaqit, as I said, and the lyrics go it says, when thoughts are flying free, hope will always come around and lighten up the future. And the chorus says, all roads will be open, unending possibilities will come. So it's kind of the general idea, I think of it as the water is your friend. When you're paddling with that wonderful Greenland paddle, you can think of these kind of thoughts. So here it is, Eqqarsaaqit by Iisaavaraq Petrussen.
Eqqarsaaqit, engaged to a port. Now you tit, tackle to a port. See you nisak, kamatila sajdugu. Imenumi, tatigigani. Iliu tit, uperigani. Olnigasat, akemifikangitat. Agutisani, amatitetamate. Peria fissat, taku sulesach dutik. Eqqarsaaqit, engaged to a port. Now you tit, taku to a port. See you nisak, kamatila sajdugu. Imenumi, tatigigani. Iliu tit, uperigani. Olnigasat, akemifikangitat. Inutit kisatit kamanitut nalatashduit. Umatiptis dernara hiperasanagu. Engeshda ususu chimime pekatimatit. Eqqarsaaqit, engaged to a port. Now you tit, tackle to a port. See you nisak, Amadila sajdu.
And the name of that CD is, in Greenlandic, Tarnima, Teqeqqui, Ornillugit, which is translated on the cover as My Inner Voyage. So his cover's got a picture of him sitting on the couch playing his Stratocaster. Iisaavaraq Petrussen. It is available on the atlanticmusic.gl website. I find the other songs on the CD equally as good, and a few of them he sings in English. So if you're looking to hear something you can understand all the way through, you might want to take a listen to this CD. Well, coming up in episode number 10, I still have plenty left about more about Maligiaq I could do, and more about the competition I could do, and more about Greenland paddles. But I think next episode we are going to review the kayak song, and I'll tell you the translation of the kayak song and some other things about the Greenlandic language in general. All right. Till then, this is Dubside saying takus.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast or would like to give us some feedback or have some questions or ideas for topics to discuss in the future, leave us a comment or send us an email at dubcastwithdubside@gmail.com. I read these comments to Dubside every week, and I know he loves to hear from our listeners. Also, we would appreciate it if you would consider helping support the Dubcast. You can donate through Patreon or directly through PayPal using our email address. Thanks again, and we will see you next week.